Welcome to the Bureau of Automotive Repair's Diesel Vehicle Inspection Training. This training is intended for licensed smog check technicians and will provide instruction on the diesel smog check inspection procedures. The smog check program includes diesel-powered vehicles that are 1998 model year and newer with a gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds or less. The diesel smog check inspection procedures includes a visual test, an OBD test, and a visible smoke test. The diesel program is statewide. When is a diesel smog check required? The first smog check inspection for a diesel vehicle is required within 2 years after a diesel vehicle is purchased new. Keep in mind, there is no 8 model year exemption from biennial inspections for diesel vehicles. Change of ownership inspections for diesel vehicles do not have a 4-year exemption either. Consumers bringing any vehicle from out of state must obtain a smog check inspection and a certificate of compliance prior to registering their vehicle at the Department of Motor Vehicles. This applies to diesel vehicles as well. The diesel smog check inspection is different from the gasoline vehicle smog check inspection in the following ways. The diesel smog check inspection does not include a timing test, an EGR functional test, a low pressure fuel evaporative test, a fuel cap test, an ASM/TSI tailpipe test, or a liquid fuel leak test. However, a vehicle can still be rejected for safety reasons, such as a fuel leak. ARB studies show that diesel vehicles that have been tampered with a non-approved device or poorly maintained contribute significantly to air pollution. Diesel particulate matter is a toxic air contaminant. Diesel emissions cause increased health risks such as respiratory problems, asthma, cancer, or premature death. There are 3 parts of the visual inspection for diesel vehicles. 1. Identify the emission control information on diesel vehicle underhood labels. 2. Locate and inspect the emission control system components. And 3. Identify any non-approved modifications or aftermarket parts. You must use all available information necessary to determine the vehicle's emission control requirements, including but not limited to the underhood emission control label, a current emission control application guide, emission control repair manuals, emission component locator guides, manufacturer emission control recalls, and vacuum hose routing diagrams. Some emission controls on diesel vehicles that are not found on gasoline vehicles include crankcase controls, diesel particulate filters such as a periodic trap oxidizer or PTOX, NOx adsorber, and urea, which is a chemical used in the process of scrubbing NOx from diesel exhaust. Now let's discuss the emission control information that is found on diesel vehicle underhood labels, and we'll also review emission control system component descriptions. Please become familiar with diesel emission system terms and acronyms. Labels like this will help to determine the required components. Manufacturers typically affix multiple labels on the same vehicle. Here are labels from a 2007 Dodge Ram, including the engine label, underhood label, and modification label. The modification label documents authorized factory modifications to the vehicle's emission control components. Typically, diesel trucks are EPA, ARB certified to the engine, not the chassis. Careful inspection of these labels will help to properly determine the vehicle's required emission controls. This is the same underhood label from the 2007 Dodge Ram. Note the reference to emission systems: charged air cooler, diesel direct injection, NOx adsorber catalyst, periodic trap oxidizer, and turbocharger. The following are some examples of diesel control components. This is a 2005 Dodge Ram crankcase breather CB system. To view this system, a plastic cover must be removed. The test is to ensure that the components are not missing, modified, or disconnected. During the visual portion of a smog check inspection, you are required to remove covers to gain access to emission components as needed. This is an example of a 2008 Ford F-250 diesel. Please note the periodic trap oxidizer identified on the emission label as PTOX. These are frequently used on diesel vehicles. You can also see the oxidation catalyst on the right. Note these two components are connected together in the exhaust system. In this picture, we have an example of a 1998 Dodge Ram air intake heater, also known as an AIH. In this picture, we have an example of a water-cooled EGR from a 2008 Ford F-250. During the following slides, we will discuss diesel-related aftermarket part identification. ARB approved aftermarket parts listings can be found on ARB's website. In addition, an aftermarket parts verification guide can be found on BAR's website. If a vehicle is equipped with parts that modify the original emission control configuration, you must verify whether those parts are ARB approved or exempted. If the parts installed are not ARB approved or exempted, and the original emission control configuration has been modified, the corresponding emission controls are considered modified, and the vehicle shall fail the inspection. Turbo boost and exhaust temperature gauges are not a cause for a smog check failure. However, the presence of these sensors may indicate modifications to the vehicle's emission control systems. If you observe an exhaust temperature sensor that is installed as part of a non-approved computer system reprogramming device, you must fail the vehicle for having tampered emission devices. This is an example of an exhaust gas temperature sensor. It is connected to the display module that modifies the parameters of the vehicle's computer controls. If you encounter a device like this type, you should consult ARB's website to check for an executive order and that the executive order applies to this vehicle. Here is an example of an air intake elbow. This modification will be allowed for smog check purposes and will not require an ARB executive order to pass smog check. More details on this type of modification can be found in the smog check manual on BAR's website. Also note the air intake heater must be present and connected to the larger diameter wire since this is an emission component. Here is an example of a cold air intake system. This type of system will not cause a diesel vehicle to fail its smog check inspection. If the installation of a cold air intake system causes an emission-related part to be modified or relocated, you need to check for an ARB executive order authorizing the installation of the aftermarket component. Here is an example of an aftermarket retrofit fuel system on a 1999 Volkswagen Golf. This type of aftermarket modification will require an ARB executive order in order to pass the smog check inspection. The use of biodiesel fuel in place of diesel fuel is not a cause for smog check failure, but aftermarket retrofit fuel systems, such as this one displayed here, would require ARB approval. In general, the diesel OBD functional test is the same as that for gasoline-powered vehicles. The malfunction indicator lamp, or MIL, bulb check is used first to determine that the dashboard MIL is operational. The MIL then must be checked if it is on, indicating a failing condition. Follow the OIS prompts to connect the tester lead to the Diagnostic Link Connector, or DLC, on the vehicle. The OBD test may consist of assessments of the OBD2 system's ability to communicate, readiness of system monitors, diagnostic trouble codes, vehicle identification, the existence of system modifications, and a check of the MIL command status. Some aftermarket computer programmers attach to the DLC. If you find a connector attached to the DLC, look for an aftermarket programmer. The visible smoke test consists of a test for smoke from the vehicle's crankcase and tailpipe while the vehicle is idling, and a check for smoke during the bar snap test. Before beginning the visible smoke test, check that there are no obvious hazards that would make a vehicle unsafe to test. These include abnormal engine noises, overheating, or leaking fluids, including fuel leaks or other safety-related problems. Place the transmission in park or neutral with the parking brake on and/or wheel chocks in place. Turn off all accessories, including air conditioning. Next, ensure the vehicle is at normal operating temperature. Position the vehicle to ensure there are no drafts that can disturb the exhaust plume. Finally, make sure that there is nothing in the shop environment, such as equipment or toolboxes, which would prevent you from clearly observing the exhaust plume. This bar snap test will require a clear line of sight for 15 feet from the tailpipe. Some examples of acceptable means of observing the smoke plume include adjusting the seat and mirror positions, using a separate mirror, an exhaust hose, or white deflector board and lights. Performing the crankcase smoke test. With the engine running at idle, observe the crankcase system for visible smoke for 10 seconds and fail the vehicle if any visible smoke is observed during this time. Performing the idle smoke test. With the engine running at idle, observe the vehicle's tailpipe exhaust plume for 10 seconds and fail the vehicle if any visible smoke is observed during this time. Performing the bar snap test. The bar snap test consists of pushing the accelerator pedal quickly from the idle position to between 2,000 and 3,000 RPMs, then immediately releasing it to allow the engine to return to idle for at least 3 seconds between each snap. There are 3 bar snaps that must be performed. The first bar snap is performed to familiarize yourself with the engine response. Do not check for tailpipe smoke during the first bar snap test. Perform the second and third bar snaps, watching for a visible smoke plume from the vicinity of the tailpipe. The visible smoke plume can most often be seen about 5 to 15 feet from the tailpipe. Fail a vehicle if the visible smoke plume lingers for more than 3 seconds on the second or third bar snaps. Start counting the lingering smoke time immediately upon the peak snapping of the pedal. For example, if the vehicle allows you to put the pedal all the way to the floor, then begin counting when the pedal hits the floor. Here's an example of a vehicle emitting smoke that does not linger for more than 3 seconds. You may consider this an example of a vehicle passing the bar snap portion of the visible smoke test. Here is an example of a vehicle emitting smoke that lingers for more than 3 seconds. You may consider this an example of a vehicle failing the bar snap portion of the visible smoke test. Fail the vehicle if there is any visible smoke observed from the crankcase or any of the tailpipes while the vehicle is idling, or if either of the final 2 bar snaps produce a visible smoke plume that lingers for more than 3 seconds from any tailpipe. Smoke from any area other than the vehicle's tailpipe or crankcase system, such as an oil leak onto the exhaust manifold, does not constitute a failure of the visible smoke test. Thank you for participating in the Bureau of Automotive Repair's Diesel Inspection Training Program.